What if I told you that the buildings you walk past every day, the ones that look so mundane they almost disappear into the background, are actually hungry? We've all seen them, those low-profile medical offices sitting off highways like Route 9, their flat roofs collecting rain, and their fluorescent signs buzzing with a frequency that feels like a headache you can't quite shake. During the day, they are places of healing and routine, but once the sun goes down and the last receptionist clocks out at 7:30, these spaces transform into what researchers call non-places, liminal zones where the failure of human presence creates a psychological vacuum. For most people, these buildings are just empty husks until morning. But for those of us who work the graveyard shift, they are something else entirely. They are machines, and eventually a machine needs to be fed. I worked the nights for a long time, cleaning crew. It's a job that places you in a state of sensory isolation, a nightingale effect, where you become a solitary ghost wandering through miles of prostrate, empty rooms. You learn the rhythm of a building like that. You learn which lights flicker before they die, and which hallways carry a dropped pen's echo through 3 sets of closed doors. You start to move without thinking, a state of pathway amnesia, where your feet know the turns before your mind does. But there was one room in that building off Route 9 that didn't fit the rhythm. It was at the end of the back corridor. No number, no sign. It stayed locked, and as a cleaner, you're taught to ignore what isn't on the contract. But one night, the door was open, just a crack. A thin line of light stretched across the tile, cutting through the grout lines with surgical precision. I told myself I was just checking to see if it had been added to my rotation. That's the lie I used to step inside. The room was small, windowless, and smelled of fresh, sharp chemical paint, the kind that catches in the back of your throat. In the center was a single chair, metal-framed and bolted directly into the floor. It was the kind of furniture designed for efficiency, not comfort, a clinical anchor that prioritizes the process over the person. I stood there in the humming silence of the overhead lights, staring at the walls where the new paint didn't quite hide the marks underneath, shapes that looked like they were trying to climb out from under the coat. I didn't stay long that first night. I backed out, heard the latch click, and finished my shift. But the next night, the door was open again. Same angle, same line of light. I noticed then that the bolts holding the chair were new, clean, sharp metal that caught the light differently than the worn frame. I crouched down, ran a finger over the edge of the metal. No dust, no grime. It had been handled recently. In a building that was supposed to be empty, someone was working on this chair. This is where the routine starts to fracture. I began to notice small inconsistencies in the rest of the building. A magazine on a waiting room table would be bent at a different angle than I'd left it. A stack of paperwork I'd meticulously aligned would be slightly skewed an hour later. It's what psychologists call the architectural uncanny, the feeling that a familiar space has become alien and off. I started coming in earlier, sitting in my car at 7:15 just to watch the receptionist leave. I wanted to see who was entering that room, but nobody ever did. The building would empty, I would go in, and that door would be closed. I'd walk the floor, listening to the wheels of my cart roll over the seams in the tile, and when I'd return to that corridor, the door would be open. I never saw it move. It was just closed, and then it wasn't. It felt like a no-clip point in reality, a space existing outside the governed laws of the physical world. One night, I sat in it. The metal was colder than I expected, pulling the heat out of my body with a predatory hunger. I rested my hands on my knees, back straight, and looked at the wall. The hum of the lights settled into a steady, predictable frequency, a sound that masks the screams of the refined. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I stood up, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I started skipping parts of my route to spend more time in that chair. I stopped emptying the trash. I stopped wiping the desks. And that's when I realized the building didn't need me anymore. I came in after a night of doing absolutely nothing, expecting a reprimand, but the floors were spotless. The surfaces were wiped cleaner than I could have ever managed. The trash was gone. The room was doing the job for me. It was processing the environment, refining the space into a state of sterile, ontological perfection. I started bringing things to the room, a logo printed pen from the desk, a clipboard, a chipped paperweight. I'd leave them by the chair, and the next night they'd be gone, vanished without a scuff or a trace of dust. The room room was consuming the essence of the objects to maintain the building's perfection. Then, the idea of bringing a person took hold. It wasn't a choice. It felt like a next step in a sequence that had already been written for me. I picked the maintenance guy. He was a man of routine, someone who clanked his toolbox in the hallways and worked late hours. It was so easy to lead him down that corridor. The door was closed when we arrived, and then, without a sound, it was open. I got him into the chair. He struggled at first, his words breaking apart into "wait" and "what?" his breath hitching as the room began its work. I watched his face, looking for a mistake, a sign that I should stop, but there was nothing. I left him there and closed the door. The next night, he was gone. No sign of a struggle, no toolbox, just the new bolts, the fresh paint, and the empty chair. The room hadn't just killed him, it had refined him. It had processed his existence until there was nothing left but the sterile order of the office. I kept my routine. I paid my bills. I kept my conversations short and forgettable, keeping the room separate from the rest of my life. But you can only feed a machine for so long before it decides you're the next course. One night, I came in late. The lights were dimmer, the air heavier. I walked to the back corridor, and the door was open wider than I'd ever seen it. The chair was occupied. It wasn't the maintenance guy. It wasn't any of the others I'd brought. It was a figure sitting exactly as I did, hands on knees, back straight, head angled down. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs, and the figure lifted its head. I saw my face. Not a perfect match, but close enough to trigger that uncanny valley response that makes your skin crawl. It was a refined version of me, a record of my presence that the room had kept and improved upon. I tried to run, but the door behind me was already closed. I hadn't heard the click. I hadn't seen it move. I was trapped in the refinement chamber. The figure stood and moved toward me. There was a shift in the air, a change in the light, and suddenly my thoughts stopped lining up. My memory began to fragment, each object loosed into a group of impressions, color, odor, texture, until I was a solitary prisoner of my own mind. When I opened my eyes, I was the one in the chair, hands on knees, back straight, looking at the wall. I tried to stand, but my body wouldn't respond. It was like I had become mere reliable responsiveness to stimuli, a stabilized part of the building's internal code. I was no longer a person. I was data being refined. The room was extracting my woe, my malice, my dread, and turning it into the sterile silence of the hallways. Eventually, I heard footsteps, soft, measured, a rhythm I knew by heart. A new hire walked into the room, looking around with the same curiosity that had once led me inside. He took in the sterile walls, the buzzing light, and then he looked at me. He didn't understand yet. He didn't see the trap. He just saw a man in a chair at the end of a long night. He'll stay. He'll learn. He'll bring things to the room. And eventually, the room will decide it's time for me to stand again and for him to sit. Because the building must stay clean. The routine must be maintained. And out on Route 9, the sign will keep buzzing, a silent dinner bell for a place that never, ever sleeps. I'm just waiting for the next shift to begin. I'm just waiting for the room to decide I'm finally finished.